Those are all your taxes.
Be there for a month or two to find a new house. They just don't want to now. Well, they're gonna leave, but house prices
Just
all went up around that time last year. It was like this time last year.
So they've been there for a year?
They paid for half of everything.
But they haven't been in.
No traffic today. Yeah, it wasn't bad.
I don't. To do this right, I know,
Can you eat these pretzels? I'm gonna have to buy. I know why they're $1.99 for a big old bag of all this. I hate cooking. Oh, do you? I don't have that issue. I love these flat.
That's like
They're very tasty.
I did not know that was red plate for some reason that never.
You're against me and she's gonna take 75%.
Got it on my pen.
Do that 25%.
I think I took it out.
I'm looking at it, 25. Well, that's 30 grand.
What is that, and no more?
Really gonna have to try to
I was gonna say, not ready, how long before they're right?
Not yet.
You're really gonna feel why is it bother you?
I think today it's gonna be like, kind of
No, I think my older age, I'm getting more.
Oh, no,
Well, I've always decided. I separated.
Well, yes,
Big
well,
ones and little ones.
How many are there?
Did you do your family do now? Control that I have to have, the only control I have over my potato
I'm
chips.
so tired of it.
Yeah.
I couldn't see anything.
I have no control of anything else, but I have it on my potato chips.
Wednesdays are not my day. Like, by Wednesday, I feel like I have to buy a truck, and then Thursday, I'm like, yeah! Thursday!
What do you say on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday, I'm like, and because it's like the first day.
I'm leaning towards
Wednesdays
these.
Friday. Friday.
Yeah.
I know, you can do it for a judgment against the HOA, and I know people are doing it, but I'm not sure. It could be all of the above, for all I know.
Yeah, we're great hours.
Were they really, let's see your.
I told Eric last night, I was like, I'm never gonna say about
underline what he did on the
It's pretty bad.
Like, why would I ever think about that ever again?
You see how everything all of a sudden, you're like.
Maybe that's the point.
We'll consider food on the committee.
You grind for 12-hour days, working all time long.
And you're making that very same.
I work 5 hours.
How are you today? I am officer. All officers. But, and there are like.
Yeah. And then there's like 4 hours. Thursdays and Fridays. I know, it's a great day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it seems so much shorter because you don't have work.
And that's 300 days.
Tomorrow is my writing. And then Friday we're going to pyramid. And I'm going to be here on a boat, like,
You shoot the deck, you shoot the camera.
reading.
Tomorrow is my Friday as well, but at 11 o'clock, I will be on a plane to Las Vegas.
Why?
The USA Prep Stars and Stripes Championship Showcase.
What is it?
Is this not one?
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I could have shown you, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be
Sure.
I wanted to be all official and important.
No, they're in a board meeting, they're not gonna respond.
There's 4 pages long, what is it, 3 pages long? I know, it's like the,
Coach.
well, how, well, there's 20 instead of
From New
50.
York.
Two,
Hey, Dennis,
they did a stat.
it's not that hot here. He's already in the
When
morning.
they did that, they had a short seat.
It's like, it's not that hot here.
It's like a normal 12, but down to 8. Then the roof got, that time the roof got. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you can't move. The manufacturer allows you to do that if you have
Yeah.
longer cover layout.
Yeah,
I don't know how to make it through tonight.
Are you feeling it?
All right.
right now.
I have to work on Saturday.
It's fine, I'm crying on the inside.
I don't know.
Hear me okay? Wait, you can hear me okay? All right, very good. Well, tonight we're going to have part 2 of financial management. But first, let me ask, are there any questions about the stuff we covered last night?
Yeah, could you go back over the whole thing?
Let me get the highlights for you. And I will tell you that it should be recorded because we did figure out not how to put it on the UNLV system, but put it on YouTube. So if you go to the Learning Management System and click on the link, it will take you to YouTube to the video. Okay, so if you want to review some of that. There are some educational videos on systems, even for HOAs, that are on the on YouTube if you want to search for it. But I didn't think they were very good. If you want me to, I'll send you a link. You can look all of that stuff up. In fact, on tonight's, my presentation is going to look a little different than yours because I do have a couple of links for videos that I want us to watch. I don't do that very often, but we'll talk about that when we get there. To do a really quick review, though, let's just talk for a moment about the 4 primary financial statements that come up all the time. Of course, the balance sheet, right? And you know the balance sheet is a snapshot of your financial condition. It is cumulative, but it's at a particular point in time. So it's going to show you your assets, what you own, liabilities, what you owe, and then the difference is the equity, or what you have invested in the corporation in this particular case. So that's the balance sheet. The income statement, or the profit and loss statement, or the revenue and expense statement is a monthly report that shows you the revenue you brought in, and you spent that, and whether or not you had a net income. You can look at that statement both on a month-to-date basis and a year-to-date basis. So part of it is cumulative for the current year. So these are the documents that you're going to spend the most time with. The changes in fund balance are required financial statement, but it's pretty easy to put together. You have your starting balance, what happened, did it go up or down, and what's your ending balance. So it shows you, however, and why it's important, it shows you both on the operating account and the reserve account what happened over that usually a 12-month period. You'll get it as part of your monthly statement. But on a month-to-month basis, it's not really that meaningful unless you're a really large association where you might have significant amounts of money. But overall, that's kind of a year-end statement. You see it every month, but it'd be more meaningful at the end of the year. And the fourth that we talk about is cash flow statement. Because remember, we said that we're going to use accrual accounting. It means that we record the revenue when it's billed and the expense when it's incurred, not when we receive the cash. So the problem with that, it's not really a problem, but one of the flaws is that you make a lot of profit, but you're in cash in bank. The need a cash flow statement is to understand how cash is coming in, how it's going out, how you're spending that money. Because if you do experience that problem, look at it. You go to your aging report. If you're sitting there and it looks like you're making money, but you don't have any cash on hand, the problem is collection. Your receivables people are not paying you quickly enough. So your cash flow means that if it's really severe restriction, then you can't pay your bills because people aren't paying theirs. Okay, so that's a quick thumbnail update from last night. Are there other specific questions that anyone has that I can answer for you? If you feel a little lost, go back over the PowerPoint presentation. Look at the questions from the study questions and then some of the supporting material that's on the thumb drive. And if you have anything specific, feel free to shoot me an email. Okay, is that working? This was working, I promise. Sorry about that. Control. Okay, so tonight, we're going to look at another part of financial budget management. We're going to talk about budgeting tonight. How many do a budget, a personal budget? Anybody? Great. It's so easy these days, you know. With all of my banking is online, I can hit a button and it tells me how I spent my money. That makes budgeting so much easier. How many of you actually follow the budget? Sometimes not. Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about budgeting in the common interest community, both operating reserve accounts. We'll say a lot about that. We're going to revisit accounts payable and accounts receivable. Because you remember we talked about preventing fraud and some of those kinds of things. We're going to focus a little bit more, drill down on payables and receivables and the kinds of safeguards that you might want to look at in an ideal situation. Keep in mind that part of preventing fraud is separation of duties. So you don't have one person doing everything. I saw a case a few years back in a smaller nonprofit here in town. That, you know, it was a small office, like 3 staff people, but the executive director created a phony company. And then she ordered supplies from this phony company because she was the one who wrote the purchase order, signed off on the checks. It was stealing. So you can have having a separation of those functions will help keep your account safe and keep the integrity of your accounting system safe. That's something that your CPA will help you stop and make sure you have it under control. So we'll talk about that and how it relates to accounts payable and accounts receivable, because that's money in, money out. That's what we control. We'll talk about collections, delinquencies, and foreclosure, big topics. We're going to talk about audits, of course, and reviews. Those are important. And then we're going to say a little bit about taxes. I know we talked about this a little bit in a previous class. The thing to remember here is, and the question that always comes up, well, non-profit corporation. Why would we be subject to paying taxes? What comes in is usually if you have what's called unrelated business income. If you don't, I'll tell you the story about, what's the name of that one? I'll tell you a story about one of the associations here in town that really got in trouble with the IRS. It's a true story. But anyway, your goal as an association is to return value, not money, but value to your homeowners. How do you do that? You do that by maintaining the common elements and providing a community that is up to the standards described in the documents. These are standards that your homeowners have come to expect. If they're going to notice that, right? That's what your profit is. Your profit is returning that value to those homeowners. It's not putting in a shareholder's pocket, right? As long as that is what you're accomplishing with that money, you're not going to be taxed on that. But IRS likes to look at nonprofit corporations if they are earning income that is unrelated to their primary purpose, taxable. So let's say that the association owns a couple of units that they acquired through foreclosure. They want to rent those units. Then, well, that's fine, but part of the consequences is that's not unrelated income. You're going to have to pay taxes on it. An example might be you have a clubhouse. And that clubhouse is rented out to people outside the association. That's unrelated business income that then is taxable. So these decisions about how you do these things, you need to make in conjunction with your CPA. how that, what it looks like and how that impacts how you operate. Let's start with our revenue streams. We have basically three kinds of assessments. Regular assessments, which include our operating expenses, our contribution to the reserve, and they can be collected annually, quarterly, or monthly. Most are monthly. It's defined specifically in your governing documents. Then special assessments that may have to impose due to unexpected events, cost overruns, or incidences that aren't covered by insurance or that exceed the limits of our insurance. That's something we're going to talk about and watch a video on here in just a minute. And there are reserve assessments. Our assessments typically to make up a deficit in the reserve account. They go directly to the reserve account. And we'll talk about the board's authority to those assessments. So the primary revenue sources of association don't have up there finance, do I? Finance should not be part of your budget, except cases that are somewhat unusual with a very large association. Your accountant then will make you. So there's a bit of a contradiction. You got to follow good accounting practices. But the message here is really for those smaller associations that you don't include fines in your budget, because you can't rely on fines and shouldn't rely on fines. That's a real red flag. If you take over an association and looking at their budget and you see that they have a reliance on fines, first of all, that's a bit of a business. But the other message there is they may be having financial issues due to long-standing practices. Because, for one thing, boards can sometimes, you have to tell them and explain to them why it's important to occasionally raise assessments. Most boards, they're very proud of themselves if they, I didn't raise assessments in 5 years. Well, cutting off those to spite your face. Because it's important to make sure that the assessments cover what you truly need to keep the standards up in that community. Because if you don't, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the community starts to look run down. Profits go down, sales go down, people leave. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So part of when you talk about budgets with your board is to explain to them that the measure of a good and successful board is not how low you kept the assessments. That's a useless metric. The important metric is how you maintain the assets that are entrusted to you, and those assets are common elements. Make sense? Annual assessments. This is in 116.3115. That section of NRS 116 deals with financial matters and reserve assessments. Okay? It talks about common expenses, and it says that those common expenses fund the operating budget, the day-to-day operations of the association, and contributions to the reserves. A question that I used to always get when I was at the division was get a call from a homeowner saying, well, how much should our reserves be? I don't know. What's the answer to that? They always want a dollar amount or a percentage. The correct answer is, what are the requirements of your governing documents? Your governing documents and the standards that your clients have come to expect, your homeowners have come to expect, should dictate the level of that account and the reserve study itself. It's hard to give a number. We're about targets that ensure reasonably well adequate funding. But remember, we're trying in a reserve study to estimate what's going to happen over the next 30 years. For the next 5, we're going to update it every 5 years. And we're not going to be right on target. As pointed out last night, we have to think about those issues that are going to fall outside our planning. That happens all the time. So focus when we're preparing a budget, we'll say more about this, what are the standards that our clients expect, homeowners expect, and what are the requirements in the governing documents? One of the things that we have to also take account of there is it's kind of worded awkwardly. If something benefits fewer than all owners, then only those owners are assessed. What it means is, if you have limited common elements, okay? Like in my community, I think I've mentioned this before, I have a pool, but I'm in a sub where we have 81 units, and there are 174 units, but only 81 have access to the pool. Now, I love it if the rest of the community would pay for my pool, but that's not fair. The people who use it, so it's limited, and that's what it's trying to say here, although it's not worded very clearly. That pool only benefits the owners, it does. It benefits everybody. So I can't expect them to pay. It's a limited common elements, and only the owners who benefit from those elements are proportional. So, for example, costs of insurance and utilities. Now, of course, some condo developments, utilities are rolled into the assessments. That's a different issue, but in generally, for most communities with single-family homes, are going to be proportional or divvied in some logical manner, whether it's by just total division by the number of units, some other formula. So a little more about that. The assessments are due annually, but they may be paid quarterly or monthly. Most are monthly. The payment schedule is usually going to be defined in your governing documents. Okay? All right, what's that? According to the governing documents, any legal judgments, this is the important thing I want us to watch. We're going to watch. I'm here, the ABC affiliate, Channel 13, has a series where slam HOAs. No, but I want to show you this video because then we'll talk about it afterwards. But the message I want you to keep in your mind as we're going through this was a lawsuit recently settled for an issue where I think the association was wrong. But settlement was beyond anything that will be covered by their interest. It means that only those who own the property at the time will have to make up the difference. And the difference is huge. I gotta have to go up here and click to get this working. So it's only about a 3-minute video.
Yeah.
Let me get it up and running.
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me know how I did it.
We gotta watch.
First up, go to Wix.com.
An HOA's negligence leaves a teenager with permanent brain damage and hundreds of homeowners on the hook for millions of dollars. Contact 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears has the devastating story that everyone who has a homeowners association needs to see.
I can try.
5 years ago, 15-year-old Carl Thompson came here to his community playground to sit down on a swing and send a text. It was a day that would forever change his life.
5 years later, a $20 million jury verdict against the Lamplight Village HOA at Centennial Springs.
Are you certain about your future?
All be something his attorneys say could have easily been prevented.
You can still see the rust on the stubs where the crossbar connected. It was one just like this that fell down on Carl Thompson's head, a 42-pound bar that crushed part of his skull,
resulting in permanent brain damage, depression, memory loss, migraines, and muscle spasms that will plague him for life.
It was a conscious disregard for the safety of everybody in that community. They care.
Attorneys Sean Claggett and Al Lasso say the Lamplight Village Board violated its own CNRs, Nevada law, the manufacturer's warranty, and Consumer Product Safety Commission standards by failing to have a maintenance and inspection plan on the swing set in its common area.
The swing set failed a previous time.
And when the manufacturer told the board it required regular maintenance and inspection,
We made a decision that they were just on our legs trying to get an extra $150 a month maintenance plan for a steel structure.
structure where the crossbar corroded from use and nearby sprinklers. In court, Pinnacle Property Management said the HOA had plenty of money and had spent nearly $160,000 on other repairs and maintenance around the community.
And not a single penny of that was spent on maintenance, inspection, of playgrounds. Correct.
In court, what it would take for the HOA to put a plan in place, the former board president said it would have to be required after a formal study.
That's what we take, not kids. Overruled. I think that that's a reason to put something into place or someone got hurt.
Lamplight Village homeowners posting about this on Facebook claimed they were kept in the dark by the HOA about the lawsuit and how it could impact them. The $20 million verdict far exceeds the HOA's insurance policy, which means homeowners are likely on the hook for around $80,000 each. Darcy Spears, 13 Action News.
Some of our controls aren't as user-friendly as we'd like. Not us. There we go. Thank you. I apologize for the audio on that. Able to hear most of it. How about in radio? Could you hear that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the issue here, association had a swing set, playground. The reasons that aren't clear to me were not part of the reserve study. Someone was injured and went to court. A huge $20 million settlement. That fees what any insurance company is going to carry. Because it's not clear to me. Clearly the HOA was involved. The problem is when you get a settlement like that, who's responsible? So I know I heard that those homeowners are on the hook about $80,000 each. So there's going to be a special assessment. It may not be all in a one lump sum, but they're going to have to be paying that for a while. If they sell their property, they're still on the hook because you can't transfer that liability to a new homeowner. For example, I feel sorry, of course, for the person who was injured, but this could have been avoided. This was absolutely avoidable had they simply included the playground equipment in the reserve study. And you couldn't quite hear it, but the president was explaining what it would take to do that. And he was talking about, reserve study for playground equipment, which had been done before. And it wasn't a matter of money, so I don't know the details of what happened here. But what it illustrates is that if you have significant liability, come back to the homeowners themselves in the form of a special assessment that they will have to pay even if they sell their property and move. They would have to disclose it, but the new buyer would not be liable for that $8,000 hit. Got that?
Question?
Yes.
Hi. So, could you be specific about if a management company that didn't bring this up to them, is liability on the management company? And or if the management company did bring it up and the board ignored it, what would be liability to the management company at that point?
That's a great question. I'm not an attorney, but here's what my advice would be. If you are advising your client, your HOA, about an issue like this, do it. That will cover you. Because clearly, on this instance, the management company did that and told them they needed to do that. That will help you. Now, if you didn't do that, yeah, you could potentially be as liable. The other thing that you can probably expect is there's going to be additional lawsuits probably between the management company and the HOA. Yes?
I was just going to say, you don't even have to do it in writing if the minutes are accurate at the meeting, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's noted, you noted that it was maybe more than once or other meetings or something like that. So, my question is it safer to do like a notarized letter showing that you actually did do it, or can you actually trust the secretary to make notes that are accurate?
Let me rephrase this question.
This is serious. I would be extremely upset if I got hit with an $80,000.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I would be.
But here's a part of the issue. The question is, are you better off making sure that's brought up at a board meeting so in the minutes? Because I think you should do both.
Oh, okay.
Send it in writing, a letter to the board, ask that it be put on the agenda so that it be discussed at a meeting. And you get a minute. It doesn't have to be notarized, but you've got a letter expressing your concern and have to record it because board meetings are recorded. From video, again, and I'm not intimately familiar with this case, but from the video, it looked like the others were not in court. Another issue they should have been.
No, my next question.
Yeah.
Is it not getting $80,000 each when they're 4x4? How are they responsible?
Oh, they're responsible.
Can turn around and their whole lawsuit against the board?
Could, but I don't know that they would get very far with it. Certainly, there was
association.
I'm sorry?
Or the HOA association.
Well, the board, and again, you'd have to do the research. The board did not follow proper procedure in notifying homeowners, making sure that that playground was safe. Whether or not they could sue the board, I suppose, but here's going to be the problem with that again. Does everybody know what directors and officers liability insurance is? That insurance that you buy, and of course, we'll tell you more about this next week, but that is insurance that you buy that covers your directors and your officers of a corporation when they act in good faith. That's $1 million, so it's not going to cover that. Yes, ma'am?
When I moved into an HOA, and I'm going to use myself as an example because it's like I said, it's all new to me. And I don't have any children who would go to the playground, right? And I'm reading through documents and doing, like most people. How would I even know that there was supposed to be anything in there? And why would I be liable if I'm uneducated in what? I'm not exactly running for the board. I didn't say I was knowledgeable in this area, and I'm not going to be using the playground, so it's not something in my forethought of it being safe or unsafe. How am I supposed to protect myself when I'm moving into a place that, because you're the president, not to point fingers, but you're the president, if you don't know, how on earth am I supposed to know, and why am I liable now for $80,000 of that I had no idea about that law?
Because I signed into it, yes. You're even though
in there to know that.
Well, here's the issue. Okay, the question is, how can a homeowner be held liable if they didn't know about this issue? And the real question is, what's in the governing documents? So the problem is, whether or not you use the playground, whether or not I use the pool in my development, I'm still liable because I signed a contract, basically, that I read and understood the government. Now, the other issue, you also find that in the reserve study, because it should have been in the reserve study. The issue is, what if the playground isn't in the documents? What if it isn't in the reserve study?
Or I don't know if it needs to be. Okay.
and you don't know that,
Right,
but guess what? You're still liable.
really, so
Yeah.
ignorance to the law is no excuse for
Yes.
the $80,000 debt. Oh, wow.
Exactly.
That is.
I'm not suggesting,
Okay, thank you,
I'm not suggesting it's fair.
No, I know that, but I want to know,
but-
because if I buy a house and I move again, I'd like
Yeah.
to know what I'm reading and understanding
It's
now.
a purchasing into the community, so anything within that community, you're liable for.
Yeah, whether or not it's
No
fair.
idea that was, it was news to me this very moment, I had no idea that.
Because
That's scary.
in most documents, and even in the statute, there's a statement of liability, basically, for everything that the association is responsible for, whether you know it or not,
Yeah.
in that property for repair and maintenance. Yeah, Dan, you had something?
Was that teenager's family a member of the homeowners association? Did he live in there?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, 'cause it'd be interesting to know if he wasn't a member of that community, what would happen?
A visitor.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, the question was he a visitor or was he the son of an owner? I know the answer to that. I don't, because I'm really not familiar with that association. Yeah,
They could all exclude anybody, even if they're a visitor or not. It was
Yeah.
a property where they had a huge settlement,
Yeah.
and it was the grandson of a tenant living in a homeowner. And it's settled huge.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter whether they're visitors or what have you, the association would still be liable. This is why when Nick talks about things like ADA and fair housing, some things that, the best of intentions can lead you down a path that is definitely not in your best interest. So let me give you an example. The association has a clubhouse. Clubhouse is largely for exclusive use of the owners. Okay? The board makes a decision, homeowners approve, to allow a Bible study group or a quilting group to use that facility. What problem with that?
Because they're not all owners, they all.
That's right, they suddenly increase their liability in a way I bet you haven't thought of, because it's over in ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Because what happens, and you'll learn this from Nick, but since we're talking about it, the minute it becomes a public accommodation, it becomes a public accommodation if you open it up to the outside your membership. To do that, you are subject to everything that's in the ADA. And you can really get some hefty fines for those violations. That's a bit off topic. I didn't mean to go that way, but I wanted to answer that.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments about that? Yeah.
So this could have all been avoided if the management company and the board had done due diligence in their financial section of their board meeting by listing it where it should have been listed after the income statement, and that all of their financial statements were their pending liability. And it should have also been in their, what's called the, resale package.
It should have been in their reserve study. If the playground equipment had been in their reserve study, then it would have been scheduled. And also, the other place it should be, and I think you said this, is in their maintenance schedule. Because every piece of equipment the association owns, and Christine will talk about this tomorrow night, physical maintenance, every piece of equipment should have scheduled maintenance. So you would not let that rush through the way it did. So there are a whole host of issues where things went wrong. And it sounds to me like the board was notified and they did not take appropriate action. They should have. So how's this going to end? I don't answer that, because I suspect there's still going to be other lawsuits between homeowners and the board, saying they weren't notified, and the board, and the management company. I don't think this is over yet. It's probably going to get ugly, because this is recent.
When was that, this year?
I think it was last year, right? The event actually happened a couple of years ago, but it's just now working its way through. Okay.
Do you know, I mean, this is just curiosity, so if they were owners, do they proportionally have to pay their $80,000?
They do, yes. The question was, if they were owners, would they also be subject to that $80,000 payment? And the answer is yes.
Oh, they were the owner,
Yeah.
and that was their son.
Yes.
So they would still.
Yeah, they would still have to be,
That's
because,
a double whammy.
yeah, oh, it's like, well, okay, you're getting $20 million, you gotta pay back $80,000.
Right.
I'd rather have my help,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, we do.
but still.
And you're really getting 10 because your attorney's out there.
That's right. Yes, that's right, your attorney got to it. Okay. The other issue here, let me move on, I didn't mean to spend so much time on that, is damage caused by owner or tenant or invitee. You have a situation where the, a tenant or an owner crashed into the gate, let's say. We're gonna cover that, right? Oh. Right, but most, and Barbara will tell you more about this, most insurance policies have a clause in them which allow the insurance company to recoup any payment from that tenant. And if your insurance didn't cover the full cost, you could pay for that tenant. You might say, we don't want to file a claim, you're going to pay us. Different ways. Of course, now the caveat here is what's called a pizza delivery exemption. If you have a delivery person come in the community and deliver a pizza and they do something wrong in the community, you are not liable. But guest or you're a tenant and you're an owner, you should be liable. Mostly will be. Question about that?
You're not responsible for the mailman.
You're not responsible for, the question was, are you responsible for the mailman?
You're not responsible
No,
for the mailman.
any delivery,
Okay.
you're not responsible for. And then, of course, there might be special assessments for capital improvements. Capital improvements are major changes in the common elements or major additions to the common elements, okay? Give you an example, we had an association that had two tennis courts. I may have told this story. They took out one, and a little park, a capital improvement. Another association that took out a shuffleboard court, with a pickleboard?
Pickleball.
Pickleball. I don't know what the heck that is, but they put in a pickleball court. That's capital improvement. Anytime you make a major change or you add something to the common element, it has repercussions. First of all, you got to figure out how to pay for it. That's number one. Once you've paid for it and it's installed, you got to include it in your reserve study and start accruing money in your reserve account for its repair and replacement. The problem that a lot of the older associations have is governing documents don't have a mechanism for approving capital improvement projects. That means every time you're going to do one, it's like getting an amendment to your declaration. You go to the homeowners, you have to make sure that you get the right percentage approved. It's a real difficult problem. The best solution to that would be to amend your nation, which is also difficult. So there is a mechanism, and I always use Summerlin and some cities as the best example because they have a system that's in their governing documents that gives them $100 every time the property is sold. Is that right, Mindy?
A little bit more than that, but yeah.
Well, it used to be $100,
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And that money goes to an account controlled by the board.
Sure.
And the board has the authority, granted them in the documents, to get and approve capital improvement projects. It's very important, and I think most newer associations have adopted a model similar to that. Old associations is where you have a problem. There's another caveat here. If you're going to do a capital improvement, you have to get the approval of your homeowners. You have to have a meeting. That's it. And you have to give a 21-day notice. Remember tonight we were talking about how it is to try and keep up with all the different deadlines in 116. Most things are 10 days or 15 days. Now we've got a couple that are 21 days. Later, we're gonna talk about the budget, which is between 30 and 60 days. You really need to have the master calendar so that you can fill these dates. It's a nightmare. They could simplify that by just saying, okay, everything is 15 days.
Right.
All right, any questions on that?
So you're saying that they have to have a meeting notice, 21 days,
Yes.
and then they have a meeting
Yes.
inside that time frame.
Meeting, you notice the meeting 21 days in advance.
Okay.
You have the meeting. 21 days? I have no clue. It's the same as true for a lawsuit, civil action. It's 21 days.
Okay.
Why is that different? I don't answer. But you got to notice in 21 days. Any other questions about that?
Is there like a dollar amount to where you wouldn't have to have and still make improvements?
Well, if it were to most capital improvements, it's not a specific dollar amount, but if you're talking about capital improvements, that's a substantial amount. If you're just painting something, no, you don't have a meeting about that. That's in your reserve account. But major. But the guideline that I'm aware of in the statute, perhaps the proxy guideline, is what we're going to talk about in a moment, is the requirement for when you have to get a bid. The bid process depends on the size of your association. If you have an association with more than 1,000 units, any project that 1% or more of your budget has on bid. Less than 1,000 units, any project that's 3%. So you probably use that as a guide. The best thing I can recommend to you is if your funding documents do not address capital improvement projects, work with your CPA to come up with an amendment to the declaration and work to get that passed. Okay, assessment. Reserves must be adequately funded. Well, what do you mean? We talked about it a little bit. According to reserve study, the standards in the governing document, without using operating funds or a special assessment. The goal here is to be a good planner and use mathematical models to help you project out into the future. You'll see what some of that looks like when we get to reserve studies. In the result of that reserve study, is going to be this huge sheet, and it's going to list of your assets, all the major components of your assets. It's going to give the useful life, the remaining life, the cost to replace, and when it needs to be replaced. So again, think of it if you have a dishwasher that has a life expectancy of 10 years and is 8 years old, useful life is 10 years, but remaining life is only 2 years if it's already 8 years old. So the question to be answered is, what will it cost in 2 years to replace that washing machine? Make sense? Your goal is to do that level of planning, and you may have thousands of common elements that are in that reserve study. So it's a very complex system. Fortunately, that's why we have reserve study specialists. Our task is to make sure that we adequately fund those reserves with the money that's available when it's needed. Here is important. The board has authority under the statute to impose a reserve assessment, even if the governing documents otherwise, and they don't need anybody's approval. Well, here's why that is. The question was, why is that? This is one of the most powerful things the board has at their command is to order a reserve assessment. The reason is, maintaining the assets is so important to the health of that community that state legislators in their wisdom granted this authority to the board. Now, they can't just be capricious and say, hey, let's do a reserve assessment just for the heck of it. Let's make our homeowners mad. No. If they're going to do a reserve assessment, there needs to be a reason. And the most common reason is that they estimated something or the reserves are underfunded, that it's cost concern. Okay, for example, when you see a reserve study, and when Rob talks about this, you can say, well, a well-funded reserve account is at 75%. 100%. 100% is ideal. But 75% is strong. If your reserves are funded at 30%, you need to do a special assessment because you're headed for trouble. And it's like that. It gives the board the authority to order a reserve assessment to make a deficit in a reserve account. It must be done in such a way that is based on the reserve study itself. It's not capricious. They didn't just pull a number out of the air because they felt like it. I'll say, I was going to tell the story earlier, but there's a very large association down south here that kind of got in trouble overcharging on things. And here's how it happened. They were some way money. It was the opposite kind of the board never wanted to spend money. This was a board that never wanted to raise assessments to cover costs. This was a board that never wanted to spend money. They had tons of cash sitting in the bank. And the IRS got interested. Okay? The IRS came and did an audit. Even though they're a nonprofit, they had all cash sitting there, undesignated for any purpose. That's not only against NRS 116, it does track the IRS. And we're not talking about pocket change. We're talking about a fine that the IRS levied of $2 million against this association. $2 million. Now they were able to down to $280,000. But that's $180,000 of your money, if you're a homeowner, that need to be spent. So that taught them a lesson about not setting your assessment so high, about making sure that you have funds designated for specific purposes that are reasonable. Sometimes even homeowners have trouble understanding. They say, okay, we made a profit of $100, here's my cut. But it's not just the net income that we have to think about, it's the cash flow. The 12-month fiscal year is arbitrary. Life goes on beyond that 12 months. So you have to have sufficient cash reserves that are excessive to keep funding the account, the association. So anyway, this is why they have that authority. So it must be used only for reserves and cannot be used for data. It's about that. Everyone needs a budget, but especially if you're an association, you have to have a budget. So let's talk about the budget. The operating budget pays for data expenses and two common methodologies for calculating a budget. One is called zero line. Every account starts at zero, and you build up from there, ignoring historical data. You call up, say, how much is the water company going to increase this year? And everything starts at zero. I don't like that method. I think it's cumbersome and not really useful unless you happen to be at a brand new association and you're having to do all this research yourself. Have something totally new happen in the association. I'll give you an example of that. I know of an association that they had gas lights. It was an older association. Gas lights, real gas lights that the gas company ran, and they were beautiful, but they were expensive. So they had to do a zero line analysis to replace those with electrical rather than gas. One time when you might want to use a zero line budgeting plan, most of the time the trend is going to be better. I used to do a lot of budgets. I would always take the last 3 years and do a rolling So I actually have 4 years, I drop off the last year, do a rolling average. Then you have to ask yourself a couple questions. Well, what happened last year that I need to take into consideration, and what I expect to happen this year? An example I've used before is that association that had a lot of grass and got out and put in drought-tolerant landscaping. Well, what happened is their water bill went way, way down. So they improved their raised assessments for a couple of years, I think. So that's something that in the prior year, looking forward, that they could be asking themselves, well, what do we expect to happen next year? So again, anytime you're doing a budget, you're guessing on the future. And with a little practice, you can get pretty good at it. But there are always going to be some things come out of the blue that you haven't anticipated, okay? And we talked a little bit about how those things show up in financial statements when you see those variances. I gave the example of the association that discovered a water leak that was underground. That was from their statements that they saw their costs going up unexpectedly and unusually high. So ask yourself those questions when you're doing a historical trend. What last year, what do we think is going to happen this year? What's out there in the environment we need to take into account? Now, your first study is easier in some sense because it's based on your most recent reserve study, your reserve budget, I should say. That analysis will give you the dollar amounts and recommended assessment amounts for the needs of the reserves. That you have your obligation of doing analysis of the current environment. For example, if your association is responsible for private roads, and many of them are, they're a gated community, they have to do what's it called, a slurry seal every 5 years. Wonder, you budget for that, you got the money, but what happens when oil goes to $100 a barrel? All of a sudden, what I had budgeted when oil was at $60 a barrel is going to get it. When I say based on your most recent reserves study, that's true, but you also have to look at what's out there that may have impacted this study since it was reported out. Make sense? Are you with me? Right there? Yeah. You're in this little bitty window, so. Question?
Nothing, I was just, we're in a little window, I was giving a thumbs up. Good.
Okay. I'm going to my glasses changed or make that window bigger. So when we talk about operating reserve budgets, how do we distinguish what goes where? Expenses in the operating budget may include maintenance of some things, right? It includes some replacements. It's for those things that have a life expectancy of less than a year. For example, our pool has a big motor and little filters that have to be replaced annually. Those filters, because they're replaced annually, are part of the operating budget. The motor is replaced every 10 years at pump. That's a reserve budget. So you understand the difference? Basically, anything that is going to have a expected useful life of more than a year is going to end up in your reserve study. It may be 5 years. Because you have to use a little bit of judgment, talk to your reserve study specialist. If you have an item that you're concerned about, does it really fit there or should it be somewhere else? In general, hitting with the expect to be repeating every year, that's an operating item. Right? Okay. Here's the concept. Your operating budget is not based on your assessment amount. We talked a little bit about this last night. People who prepare budgets, they start with their revenue. So if our revenue is XYZ, that means this amount to spend each month, $2 a month. Don't go that way. Start with your expenses. Determine what your assessments need to be to cover your expenses plus your contribution to reserve and maintain a sufficient cash reserve. Ever watch Susie Orman? Dave Ramsey? If you want to learn to manage your finances, those are two good sources. It used to be that they recommended that have like 6 months of cash on hand. Since that was because the last our economy was really in the tank, and we really needed to have sufficient reserves. Now I think it's about 2 or 3 months of cash reserves. Have in your policy so that you know this is our target. It's not about break-even. It's about cover expenses plus make sure we have adequate cash reserves, and as well as your reserves. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, what are the governing documents and level of service do your homeowners expect? If they're accustomed to a certain level of quality and you try to cut that back, you can succeed for a while, but the chances are good you're going to run into resistance. And you want to keep that in mind. What level of service do they expect? Okay, zero line, we talked about that thing starts at zero. Historical trend is better. Plus you have some solid data that you can base it on. Look at what are the increases, what's inflation running. You know, for the first time in many years, we had increases in interest rates. For a long time, they were hovering around 3%, 3.2, 3.5. Now they're changing. That you need to think about because it's going to affect return on your money market in your reserve. Remember last night we talked about the main asset. When you make that money, you're going to put it in an investment. So the return on that investment will impact the level of your risk account. But on the other side of the equation, you have to borrow money. It's going to impact your expenses. The kinds of things that you have to think about when you're sitting down preparing that, and you're really estimating next year's expenses based on are we going to be borrowing money? Are we going to be gaining money on interest? Are there significant utility increases out there? Should we rebid or renegotiate a contract based on new information that's current? I guarantee you, if you're talking about the price of oil for slurry, your contractor is going to come to you and say, "Hey, we're going to have to renegotiate that because of X, Y, Z, because the prices went up." Contingency. Talked about this last night. Should be taking a break here soon. It's a good idea to have a slush fund. Slush fund in a negative way. Your contingency fund is there to protect you from unexpected catastrophic events. That's covered. Now, obviously, let's take the case of the swing set issue. You can't have a contingency fund with $20 million in it.
You have an IRS audit.
Yes, you will have an IRS audit. But you can have a contingency fund that has, let's say, $25,000 or $50,000 in it. That's part of your financial planning for those events. Primarily, you have big deductibles. $10,000, I think, is common. But here's what's going to happen, I think, out in Nevada because of some of the lawsuits that still go on over the investors losing money and all of that stuff when they bought all these houses from HOAs, foreclosure crisis. The DO insurance in Nevada, and Barb will say this, you have $1 million worth of coverage, but the premiums have really skyrocketed. Has anybody deal with that? What happened on D&O insurance?
It just got expensive.
Is it by a significant amount or?
Yeah,
We'll be able to
I remember noticing it and talking about it.
Sense of, what percentage increase you've seen?
Not, I was kind of new to the industry and I don't remember, it coming up.
Well, all of us will see that because of some of the events that happened during the crisis and the lawsuits. Because what insurance does is it covers your officers and directors for decisions that they make. And as long as they make decisions in good faith, these kinds of lawsuits happen, insurance companies automatically raise rates. So those are kinds of things you think about for a contingency account.
The rates not go up as fast as the retention is getting larger. And so that's what I use as a contingency account to put my retention in case I need it.
Okay, retention is kind of like the overlap from one year to another, right?
Retention would be deductible in any other type of insurance.
Okay, so deductible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So Missy's just talking about in her association exactly what they use their contingency for. What is the deductible?
Well, the deductible used to be, let me just one up. The deductible was around $8,000, and to keep our premium in the same range, it still went up. Our deductible increased to $12,000.
Okay, so what, 8,000 to 12,000?
Yeah.
That's a fairly substantial increase.
Yeah.
So
that's
in 1 year, that's 1 year, that's a pretty substantial increase. So those are the kinds of things you want to put in there. Any other things, and it doesn't have to be, a $100,000 account, but set a target. Look at your history. Talk with your risk management, which may be your insurance person, and what's reasonable for us to establish this account? And then if you have like a construction defect, you're going to have another fund, so you'll have a fund that's specific for that. Now, another thing that we talked a little bit about last night is budgeting for bad debt. This was a really big deal during the economic crisis because so many homeowners just stopped paying. They lost their jobs. They didn't have income. It's a lot of bad debt. The best way to account for that is to look at history. And just a year, but I think it's better to look at it 2 or 3 years and calculate what you might expect in bad debt. And then some accounting systems, they treat it as a reduction in revenue, so you'll see revenue less allowance, or it can be shown as a budget expense, a bad debt expense. Either way, it has the effect of either increasing expenses or decreasing revenue because it's money you're not going to collect. Since the economy has started to turn around, there's less bad debt out there, so I think that's a good thing. Does anybody have a formula they use they want to share with us?
No, because I don't think mine is right. It's what the CPA is telling us to use, and it makes no sense.
Okay.
A rolling 90 days, the debt is, and then adjust what was on the books from that before. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense when we get to the end of the year. There's a huge adjustment.
Okay. So it's huge. What Missy's saying is her CPA has them on a 90-day rolling average allowance for bad debt, but at the end of the year, you've got too much accumulated.
I do, yeah.
And then you have to make this huge accounting adjustment. So in that case, the formula that you're using probably needs to be adjusted downward. And that's not surprising because what's happened is bad debt has actually gone down because our economy is doing well. You have jobs there. Some of them are lucky enough to have gotten raises. They're paying their bills and keeping their property. So
makes sense. That's probably when it started. Even if you'd have rolled it longer, if you'd have rolled it 120, it's after they get their letter from the collection agency and they make a payment. Those wouldn't get caught up in it.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
That helps me understand why it's that way.
Well, this is a good reason why you look at these kinds of things. Even when you have a professional like CPA saying, hey, here's what I think your bad debt should be, you should change that. If you think the formula's not working, the consequences are you're constantly having to correct it, but it also misstates your financial statement. you want to talk to
It
them.
raises a red flag with homeowners that are constantly asking me why our debt is so high, because they see that figure.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. That's another good point. So your homeowners see that, they don't understand it, some do address it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good. Budgeting for fines and late fees. Fines are the same thing as assessments. In this instance, we're talking about fines for violations of the governing documents. Statute requires that you have a separate account for fines, separate from your assessments. So you're going to have at least 2 accounts for every homeowner, one for assessment and one for fines. Then you go out and create a separate bank account. It's accounting. So in general ledger, or when you're doing your chart of accounts, you account for fines due to violations of the governing documents. The reason the state is so particular on that is because you can foreclose for failure to pay assessments, but cannot foreclose for failure to pay fines. You can charge interest on unpaid assessments, but you can't charge interest on unpaid fines. So keep those separate.
There's all limits that they have, like if it's assessment's not paid or 5,000, you can't foreclose, but 6,000, yes, you can.
Good question. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The question was, is there a dollar amount where you can foreclose? It's not really a dollar amount, it's a timing issue. We'll talk about, you notice at 60 days, when you're 60 days past due, that trigger, that's a benchmark that really starts the foreclosure process. It isn't resolved. So we'll talk about that in a little bit and look at where the manager can charge and when you have to turn over to a collection agency. Because our license, right, as a collection agency, that's a separate licensure. So unless you have a license, there's one you got to turn that over. So we'll talk that in a little bit. Okay. Assessments paid by the declarant. In new development, the declarant pays those assessments until the association takes over that development. Okay? They're collected, as we said, at least annually according to the budget and the declaration. You have to allocate for the common expenses and for the limited elements. So, again, if I have, in my association, I'm paying more in assessments because of the pool than the next sub over because they don't have a pool. And hey, because I want a pool. Assessments, we just talked about that. 6 days is the cutoff in the statute. It's that point when there are certain things you'll have to do, and I've got these on another slide, where you'll have to send a letter, propose a repayment plan, make sure they have an opportunity to challenge what you say no. And if you're going to charge interest on the past due assessments, you only use a rate that's approved by the Financial Institution Division. Remember, when we talked about the first night, the structure of the Department of Business and Industry, with the Real Estate Division, obviously, is important. The other important agency is the Financial Institutions Division. Important because they are the ones who license collection companies, they license banks, pay lenders. That's all their bailiwick. They are the agency who tells us what we can charge in interest. And we're going to take a look at how they do that in a moment. Is there anything up there? Repetitious? Okay. Reserve budget based on the reserve study with known or expected increases and decreases. And the reserve budget is part of your long-range plan for association. Because the most important thing that's going to ensure asset appreciation and happy homeowners is a well-maintained community. And that's what the owner expects typically, and that's why the reserve study and the reserve budget are vital to the health of that association. Now, the state looks at it as so important, and they give the board a lot of authority to manage how much money is in those accounts. Every year, you are going to report what's in reserve to the ombudsman. Forms that do that on Form 562. Did y'all talk about that the other night? 562 and 609. 609 is specifically for the reserve study, but on the 562, there's an area that you're going to fill in. It's going to have questions about the reserve study. How much is in there? Do you expect any increase in assessments and those kinds of things? Okay. About this last night, the budget mailing is always a nightmare because it is huge. And so far, at least, the state hasn't changed. Our legislators need to change and say it's okay to post it on a website or to send it electronically. But for now, you got this huge document that you have to prepare mail to your homeowners. It's your estimated revenue expenses for your daily operations, your reserve components. The other thing that you're going to put in there is a slice of the reserve study. We'll talk more about this in a little bit, but that spreadsheet that gives you that 30-year look at all of your columns.
30-year?
Yes. 30-year? Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be part, and you'll see this next week, I guess, when Rob is here. He'll bring you, and in fact, on your thumb drive, there's a sample reserve study from a very small association. So if you want to take a look at that, you'll see what's in there. Then we talked about adequate funding for the reserves. I don't think there's anything there. All right. The budget must include whether or not it's expected that there will be a special assessment. So if the board and you, the manager, helping them prepare this budget, if you anticipate that a special assessment may be necessary, you need to disclose that. Hey, we think we might have to have XYZ this year. You have a statement describing procedures used for the reserve study and the qualifications of the person doing the reserve study. Now, the nice thing about that is all you have to do is cut and paste from your study because all of that information has to be disclosed by the reserve study specialist. When you get that, you just paste it, you pull out pages. You don't want to have to send the entire reserve study. You only want to send a summary because reserve studies will add another 5 pounds to your mailing because if you have any assets at all, it's a pretty big document. Yours probably weighs 30 pounds. What do you have in your, how many units in yours?
Well, 8,000 something, yeah.
8,000.
Yeah.
That's pretty good size. You also need to include your collection policy that the homeowners know the consequences, what's going to happen when they're going to get turned over collections. Most stations will have an arrangement or contract with a collection company. They will help you put this together. Define policy. Talk about that. People need to know what they're going to be fined if they don't trim their trees or if they have oil stains in their driveway or if they leave their garbage cans out. So you need a schedule of fines. They haven't talked about yet, in here now, found in NAC 116480. So let's say NAC, that's administrative code. Who writes administrative code? The bureaucrat, yes. Thank you.
No.
Now, the next figure here is NAC 116. In 116A, it would apply to managers and study specialists. In 116, it's pretty much going to apply to the board. Sometimes managers are included in that as well. So let me think about this. This is a requirement that any board member who has received any gifts, incentives, gratuities, or of any kind over $15, huge, $50 in the past year, that has to be disclosed to the homeowners in budget. Now, you have, as managers, a similar requirement. So it's in NAC 116A. It's for $15. But you don't report it to homeowners, you report it to the division every 2 years, renew for your rights. So it's a pretty low bar. Back of that can be a nightmare. On top of that, we're going to talk about, particularly when in the ethics class, there are caps on mayors and board members in terms of gifts that you can accept. For homeowners, for board members, it's $100 a year. For us, it's $500 a year. But even though that cap is there, it still starts at $15. A lot of record keeping, reporting for a whole lot of
The
money.
message is, don't take a gift when it says 15.
Yes, the message is, don't take a gift.
Not worth it.
The only exception in the statute is educational programs. You're going to get to go to continuing education programs. A lot of times they will have food and beverages, not alcohol, but they have beverages. That's exempt. You don't have to report that. But anything else, reportable, and it's reportable for board members as well.
Does it have a form that you include with your budget, or do you
No,
just
you
report
just,
in the letter?
you report it. It can be either be a footnote or in a letter.
There's always a debate at my place. So after a board meeting, we go to our restaurant, and I pay for it. The association pays for the board lunch.
Okay.
And they say, well, that's in return for, we don't give them paper for all the copies they have to make and those things. But I disclose that we do that then.
Well, that's a separate issue. The question is, she has lunch for her board, and actually the association pays for that. The question is that part of this reporting process? The answer is no, because it's in the budget. It's closed through the budget. I mean, you're not secretly buying a lavish lunch. Now, if you're taking your board to the Capitol Grill or some really expensive place.
To their very own restaurant, they're not getting anything
Exactly,
special.
nothing special. If you're,
That's right.
that's where you could run into trouble, is if the lunch is excessive. But it's not unusual for a board or association to provide lunch or something, dinner for a board, as long as it's not extravagant. That'll be in your budget. The issue that Mitzi asked or raised there was one of reimbursement. What do you do if your board buys supplies on behalf of the association? You have a policy for that. And the policy should say, if you do this, there should be a limit, don't have them go buy a new truck. But if they buy some supplies on a more or less urgent kind of basis, they need to have a receipt, and it needs to be approved at a meeting and disclosed in that fashion. So reimbursement is okay. Lunch are okay. They are disclosed. But what this is talking about is a separate gift just for an individual on the board.
For being a board member.
Yes.
It comes from a vendor or another homeowner.
Could be coming from a vendor. I know one community manager, I won't mention her name, even when vendors drop by and give them donuts, she accepts it.
Yeah, I give them out.
Just say no.
Just say no, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you, but no thank you.
Thank you. And tell them, I'm sorry, but I don't know if those donuts cost $15, but we don't accept them. And it's very strict about that. So you decide. You comply with the law, but it's easier to just say no. Okay. Okay, you have an option to send a budget summary. If you're a very large association and all of this paperwork just keeps mounting up, you could send a budget summary instead of the complete budget, as long as you include a notice that says where the budget is available, of course, within 60 miles, and you will provide copies upon request. You also have to notice the budget ratification meeting. The flow of things is that the board prepares the budget, submits it to the members, and members either accept it or reject it. All that kind of misleading. Reality is automatically accepted unless they reject it. But the wording that's in the statute. Now, in your thumb drive, you have a one-page checklist that helps you sort through all of these dates. This will drive you nuts. But if you remember the top line here, not less than 30 days or more than 60 days from the beginning of the new fiscal year, that's when you mail everything out. All of these other target days, like with 60 days from the board adopting the budget, not less than 14 days or more than 30 days from the budget ratification meeting. Done the math on this yet? If you follow that general guideline at the top, not less than 30 days or more than 60 days from the beginning of the fiscal year, you will cover these other dates automatically. So fiscal year is a calendar year, and you mail everything out, at the end of November, you're in May. Or you're on a June, July, and mail everything out in May, you're in May. You'll be within that window. But that checklist that's on your thumb drive, it will help you hit the target dates, and then you can put it in your calendar for each association that you're managing, and you won't go wrong, man. Budget ratification meeting. This is what it says. Unless a majority of all owners or a larger percentage specified in the governing documents, that's important terminology. We're reading US 116, and I know you guys go to bed with it every night, right? Mm-hmm. It says something to the effect that unless your governing document states otherwise, do this. There are times when the statute defers to governing documents, usually if it's a higher standard in the governing documents than what's required by law. Unless the majority of all owners or a larger percentage specified in the governing documents. So majority is, 50% plus 1. But your governing documents may say a supermajority is required, 67%, 75%. If the case, you would follow the governing documents. It not be less than a majority because that's the benchmark set in the statute. That makes sense. Budget is rejected. Then you're going to stay in the current budget until a new budget can be approved. Now, there are no requirements except the budget. That sounds counterintuitive, but it's a thing. Because what it means is that the homeowners are going to accept that budget, and if they don't, they are going to have to show up to specifically reject it. Now, what does it mean, show up? I have a story because, and I may have mentioned it before, it depends on who you ask. I've had a previous ombudsman say you had to show up in person, every homeowner, and vote to reject. Ombudsman says you can have a proxy for your neighbors. So if you have sufficient numbers, whether it's in person or by proxy, what's required in the governing document, reject a budget, then that's the benchmark. Does everybody know that? That's why there's no quorum requirements. If you don't show up, it's automatically accepted. Everybody?
If it's automatically accepted, then what do you have to do with it, and within how many days? Anything, or you?
No, you're done.
You're
at
done.
that point.
Okay.
You implement it with your fiscal year because you've already given everybody copies.
Right.
So you just start on your regular cycle. To be honest with you, yeah, the board's already approved it, and the homeowners have it by default because they didn't reject it. So you're good to go at that point. Okay? And they have copies. So, anything about that? Okay. Financial reports. It means between, so it's between audits. Your audits are only done annually. An interim statement, that's your monthly statement. We talked about monthly reporting and review regardless of when your association meets. The statements will go to the executive board and the manager every month. We talked about looking at comparing actual expenditures to the budget amount, understanding variances. We're We're going to talk a little bit more about internal checks and balances, but here we're talking, it really means separating authority so that a single person or a small handful of people are not in a position to steal from the association. Okay, proposed funds. Again, how many calls I get about this particular piece of legislation when I was with the Ombudsman's office, because it really doesn't explain what's intended. Here's what it says. Unless otherwise provided in the declaration, so again, it's referring you back to the declaration, what's saying in the declaration? Unless provided, any surplus funds of the association remaining after payment of or provision for common expenses, any prepayment of reserves must be paid back to the unit owners in portion of the liabilities, blah, blah, blah. Owners look at that, and then they look at a financial statement that says, oh, our net income was $3,000, and what, where's my share? It's really kind of poorly written because folks who don't understand how accounting works or how business works, they think every year your net should be zero. If you net it all, it goes back to them. So you have to have a plan and a policy that establishes what is our cash reserves going to be. You have surplus funds. What are we going to do with them? They have designated purposes. Most associations, if they do have surplus funds, will put them in the reserves. Because you're guessing at what it's going to cost. And if you have a little padding in there, that's a good thing. So you have a plan for that. And that includes good accounting practices of having that cash reserve. So Mitzi with cash reserve. I pick on Mitzi because I know.
Because I'm close, right?
Yeah, because she's right here.
So our cash reserve.
What is it like a 3-month, or do you have a benchmark?
What your question is? Our cash reserve for our operating million.
Okay. So what's your total budget?
$19 million.
Okay, she has a total budget of $19 million a year. How much in reserves?
I have $32 million.
She has $32 million in reserves. So her cash reserves is $1 million. So beyond $1 million in the operating account, what do you do with it?
I move it to the.
No, you give it back to homeowners.
I do not. Well, I do kind of, because their association dues would go up if I didn't fund the reserves with it.
Okay. That's the right answer.
That's where you were going. Okay.
That's where I was going. You give back to the homeowners once you met all the obligations defined in your governing documents and your financial policies. And my association does that. We have a fairly small association in my little club. A couple of years ago, we overfunded our reserves. We were at 120%,
Right.
which is really nice. So we funded, but you don't write checks to everybody. It's a rebate. So we got a notice from our board that said, you don't have to pay assessments for October, November, and December. Wow.
The holiday.
What a nice gift from our association. So it's the notion behind this. It's the notion that we all have to recognize that the money really belongs to the homeowners. But you have to be able to run a business. And you can't run a business with no cash reserves. So the amount of cash typically is going to be somewhere around 3 months of operating expenses. And that's probably about where you are. And that's why you have to have these policies in writing. Because homeowners are going to say, hey, I get a piece of that. No, let me explain how business works. We have to keep a certain amount. And then if you have another designated projects that's part of your declaration, some of that is there. So keep that in mind. Any questions? Everybody? Okay. Do y'all want to take a break for a few minutes? Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break now, and then we'll talk about investment. Be back at 7:10. Sorry, it's a little long-winded. Sorry, Pat.
Yeah, I was getting through the rush. Yeah, but I can lunch.
So we take it up and down, you know, that right before I was hired, they had lunch and over $100,000. I think you'll find it interesting.
I will, I want you to talk about it.
So.
Do you mind talking?
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
So, probably time for you to tell it, we call it more, I'm just being they will bring, a lot of people did part cash, but if they didn't bring any cash, the woman was choosing was her.
Like your receptionist.
I'm not gonna say anything more, but there was one lady who was in charge of my, so membership there, so they did the escrow check. $100 check.
And that's your check.
No, that's the construction.
Oh, okay.
Freezer, something, I don't know, I still have to memorize that.
Okay, the new owner reserve assessment.
Yeah, that's
Right, I understand that.
and then golf and swimming. Now they're all.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm collection $200. Right.
I would have it.
Oh, yeah.
That they weren't dropping their own money. Rethinking it.
We can't. Foreclosure, and you can do.
Intel computer and the so we were going, we sold.
They're not results in foreclosure. They do not include into the answer.
Oh, that's a great example.
Fine.
It is.
Finding them, not. They can result in a foreclosure. They cannot. No, but this says can. So that's why it's the wrong answer. Delinquent fines cannot, if they cannot. Right, that's why it's the wrong answer, so it's the wrong answer. Delinquent fines, it should say not, you know, say they cannot. Fines cannot.
What was interesting? I think when you go expensive and deductible and all that, yeah.
Because we're gonna talk about the statutory requirement, which is 3 months. Plus your reserve, $5 million.
Yeah. And then, of course, you know, because there's other types of money.
They're gonna contact them separately, they have to have a schedule of fees, they have to have. You answer already. Notice of. You already know.
On time. And
That's on for.
I wouldn't tell you that if you don't work where you work.
No.
My thing was, I was surprised because we filed it, she's done that with all the back. And,
I don't know if you can, you name the association. But you know, then you don't.
that's not the lady calling back. There's someone.
Are you You're doing that now because of that lawyer payment, the charges.
Immediately go.
It doesn't get charged. Trying to make it. Right. I'm not.
It's hard. But last commission.
70,000? Nope. Annual budget for your $50,000. Yeah.
They get fined, they pay, because they know.
Well, it's our representative, right?
Exactly. But board members are
Yeah.
and there's
Hundreds of homeowners fine, right? Yeah, they don't care.
hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting out there. The division can't go after them because the state law prohibits them. That's part of the comptroller's office.
I got it, baby.
And then so far down.
Exactly.
Don't get as many money.
So what they're proposing is maybe change the
No, it bothers me. We got a whole bunch more.
I mean, they're kind of so easy, so long, we have to follow. If they find out,
Yeah.
And, I mean, I had, I was in healthcare for 30 years,
Next break.
and we had,
And then we have 4, 2, 4, 6, 7 slides left.
turtle there was.
I printed the first one.
And now other clients.
This, oh, you have 4, I just have 2. I saw you had 4 and I'm like, that's too small.
I'm wondering, it made everything bigger.
get it all the way to where.
But the other thing is, division is not a criminal agency. Yes. But what should I say?
Yeah.
We are an administrative agency.
4 pages of the font size on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Figure 2 on a page is good enough.
So what they told me, I could send it to which I did, and then of course the response I get there is, it has no importance to me, I can tell you that. And-
Exactly.
And
If they,
it was,
You guys just gonna study together? Yeah, I like the way you explain this stuff.
Yeah.
I think I'm already doing like, yeah.
should I start over?
maybe, I mean,
I would think I should leave policy like that.
yes, really, that. They give you a, investigator assignment.
You can form. Kind of like I put up more. Send it to me. I'll call her. Maybe she is, I know she's not the
I've been thinking about it ever since we said it, and I'm like,
I need to go down and then look at everything and.
They're like,
sort of like going to convention, go to.
I would like him to be our
Yes, you should.
because one of the people after him is not gonna leave the ombuds alone.
Okay. Well,
I would like them to have.
Yeah, make sure you have the.
I've done that.
Okay.
2 meetings in a row.
Then report it to the ombudsman.
getting.
Okay, everybody ready to resume? Okay, we're gonna talk about, everybody. Oh, did I call the meeting?
I think we have to hear.
Hi, Gab. Okay.
They're not coming back. You better go away. To the break.
Oh, my gosh, did I take too long? I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's fine.
I'm gonna get that in a minute here.
Not much.
I think the rest of this.
I just read it.
This is loaded up front. Okay.
It's blowing hot air.
Well, okay, that's what we want to know. I know you can't say it,
No,
but we could pay attention to it.
Turn itself off after 5
look at the, I had this question about the test, the midterm, boy, it got quiet. And, if you review the PowerPoint and look at the study questions, you'll be fine. You guys are all smart people. I never got through an accounting class that quickly last night. So anyway, should we continue? You got it there? All right. What about investments? And where you find the statutory requirements are at 311395, and another very important section of regulations that you're going to hear me talk about over and over again is NAC 16.405. The reason you hear me talk about it is that's basically the job description for a board member. And when a board member gets hauled before the commission, that section of law that is most often cited, because in it lists do's and don'ts. It says things like you cannot act out of revenge, greed, or prejudice, and those kinds of things. It talks about negligence. We're going to go over that, but just be aware that that's where you find the board's job description. And it's cited more often than any other statute when a board member typically is brought before the commission. Yours is very similar, but it's in NAC 116A and NAC 116A, and it's called standards of practice. But they are very, very similar, so you'll hear me say more about that later. The thing on investments is this. When we make an investment, we want a good return. So we're willing to accept a certain amount of risk. That's our money. So we can risk it as much as we want. But when you're managing money for someone else, you have a fiduciary duty. Fiduciary meaning you always put the interests of your client ahead of your own. Then requires a different standard because the goal is not to have a maximum return on investment. The goal is to protect the principal. That's number one. Protect the principal. So you're going to invest in something that has a lower rate of return, but a safer investment vehicle, something that is insured by the government or by an approved agency. That's what's required in the statute. So one is safety, protect the principal. Number two is liquidity. If you need the cash right away, and you're locked into a long-term CD or money market or whatever it is, then that's a less liquid investment tool. So if you can have more liquidity and safety, that's good. And then finally is ROI, or return on investment. You're going to accept a lower return in exchange for increased safety and liquidity. Very good? All right. And this is in the statute, by the way. It doesn't quite use this language. It's a little bit more clumsy, I hope. But it does say that your obligation, the board's obligation, is to make sure those funds are invested in a safe and properly insured organization that is licensed to do business in Nevada. We talked last night about the fraud triangle. It was on the study questions. Here's what it actually looks like. We're going to talk about this in the context of separation of duties. So fraud triangle means opportunity, rationalization, and motivation. You have a desire to commit fraud. You have an opportunity to commit fraud, and often you'll rationalize, well, they don't need this money, no one will ever miss it anyway. The big issue of stopping this, breaking up this triangle, rests in opportunity. Because they do much about someone's motivation or their rationalization, what you can do something about is opportunity. And to minimize the opportunity for fraud, we have about separation of duties. Okay. Additionally to that, reporting, looking at those reports every month instead of every quarter, you know that's what the statute requires, will help you pick up on things that just don't look right. And something just doesn't look right, you investigate. Of course, the annual audit. And we'll talk in a minute about audit and reviews and benchmarks, but as always, no matter how big the budget, get an audit. It's going to be in the association's best interest in the long run. So if you're managing an association, it doesn't require an annual audit, convince them to get one, okay? Separation of responsibilities, we're going to talk about the accounts payable and accounts receivable, preparation and check signing. And we'll have some real life examples to show how some of these things can go awry. Okay, we just did that. Accounts payable duty. Accounts payable typically does these things. Invoice receipt and electronic storage of that receipt. They monitor vendor credits. Payment inquiries from vendors go to the AP department. Oversight of document matching. Well, what do we mean by that? Whenever you are ordering something as a business or an association, there's a series of documents that are created. You'll start with something like a purchase order. Then you'll have a receiving slip that says, okay, here's what we ordered, what we received, and then you will have the invoice. And those three documents should all agree. Well, you need that why. Now, of course, if there's a delayed shipment, if you ordered 300 pencils and you only got 150 because that's ahead in stock, that's an incomplete order. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about making sure that the purchase order was properly executed and specific for what you were ordering, and what you received matches the purchase order, and the invoice matches those two documents so that you're paying the appropriate amount for the size or whatever it is that you received. Accounting also processes payments. They integrate with the accounting system and archive documents and accounting history. So when you're paying vendors, some of the things we just talked about, make sure the invoice number and date are appropriate and match all the other documents, including the purchase order number. So the invoice will usually reference the PO number or some other tracking system within your accounting system. It could be for a standing contract where you just pay automatically every month. It's sort of like my assessments are on a standing contract. The association just takes them right out of my bank account. I don't have to write a check or anything like that. I like that because I'm lazy. Or it could be a single purchase. A standing order or single purchase are different things. The vendor name, check that. Who is it billed to and who is it shipped to? Make sure that those addresses are correct. The date of those deliveries or goods and services. Because you don't pay until you've received the product, right? And the detailed description of what those goods or services are. All that should match and should be checked by someone in accounts payable before the check is cut. So we just talked about the purchase order, what the company ordered and at what cost. The report, what did we actually receive? If we ordered 300 number 2 pencils, did we receive those or did we receive ball pens? So whatever it is, make sure you receive what you order, and then what the vendor bills to the company should be what was the agreed upon price. Now, if you have the luxury of being able to truly separate duties, you'd have like 4 people. in accounts payable. We have the luxury to have that many people, so we would have one person who prepares the PO, a person who prepares the receiving report, a third person who compares each PO, receiving report, and vendor invoice, and then a fourth person who pays the vendors. Really great, because then no one person is in a position to commit fraud, right? They can't write a fake invoice or cut a fake check or anything like that, or fudge the amount. This may be a realistic thing in every association, particularly if you're smaller. The best advice I can give you is look at where the most risk resides, and that's approving an invoice and cutting the check. Talk with your CPA about how can we best separate these duties so that bad things don't happen, so that we minimize the risk of fraud. Before we get to this, most of you have heard me pick on Mitzi. The reason I pick on Mitzi is because her association is right next to mine in Summerlin. Mitzi was licensed in California, still is? Not licensed in California, but she was licensed in California as a CAM, and she's working on her license here. She has a story she's willing to share with us about separating duties and how fraud was committed at her association. So I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute.
Okay, and
speak loudly and clearly.
Okay, I will, and I'll be quick. And it's something that's actually very concerning that this could happen. A very highly respected employee that had been an employee for many, many years at Sun City had taken on some extra duties. And so in taking on the duties, she went around to all the people that bring money in the different departments we have. We have golf brings in cash, restaurants, and then plus we have membership where people change their membership, and that's where the NORA, or the new owner reserve account, or an assessment is paid, and we're going to use $100 for the sake of the story.
Now that NORA is what I was talking about, is the capital improvement money. That's how it goes, that's NORA.
So somehow she had figured out that because NORA is not an assessment on a homeowner's account, and it's not a fine, there's really no ledger to capture it and know it was coming in. It didn't post it to either of those places. It went directly in a bank account. So when escrow checks would come in, now, we went around to all the departments and said, I'm going to drop the money in the safe. You don't need to drop your own money anymore. So she says, she's high up in the organization. She
was a CAM.
She was CAM. So now all of the money is coming to her desk because we trust her more than anybody. I wasn't here yet. I was brought in after the fact to help. But so one of the things, well, she would open the bags from all the little plastic bags that everybody seals and initials. She would open them up. She would take the cash out. How many NORA checks were in there. So if there was $800 in new homes, she would take out $800 in checks, open restaurant money, take out $800 in cash, put the $100 in checks in there, throw away the NORA envelope, cash, and the restaurant still balance. And then just go into the computer where some other employee had already entered the NORA and just delete them.
Wow. It's an amazing story. Could you all hear that okay up there?
$75,000 in 1 year that we know of for certain when we see we've been doing it for 3 years.
Wow. Wow. So we have, could you all hear that okay? Yeah. So if you have a situation where we've got an experienced community manager who understands how all of these payments are made and diverts the payments to her desk, figures out how to substitute the steel bags that have already been counted to substitute with checks and put the money in her pocket, and then to go back to the computer and delete the entry.
Oh, and by the way, she would have deleted them under your name because she had everyone's password because of her position.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she'd just jump around. Well, there's 12 people in the accounting department at that time. She'd just jump the accounting department so that nobody. So if somebody's collecting all their money at their desk, it's not a good thing.
You got it. question?
How was it determined?
Was it found? So the lowest paid person at our membership desk, that is almost a volunteer, she's a homeowner there. She took the NORA checks, and so she's figuring it out. She puts them in. A home comes back in the next day and says, I can't remember if I gave you, and she said, or the check number I gave you, and I need to record it. She said, oh, I know you paid me, and I always put them in. She went to look it up, it was gone, so she thought she made a mistake. So she started watching what she was entering and keeping a tab because she thought she's going to get fired. She went back in the next day to check that all of her stuff posted and everything she put in was gone.
Wow.
So she's like, there's something wrong. I must be doing it wrong because it never stays in.
Wow. Yeah. That's a fairly sophisticated way of stealing money.
Yeah.
But it illustrates what happens when a high-level person who's been involved with the association, you discover the weakness. So she obviously had the motivation and the opportunity. The purpose of separating off is to break that chain so that you don't have the opportunity or it's extremely difficult. I'm in a perfect system. There isn't one. I guess a really determined person who wants to steal from the association could probably find a way to do so.
I think so, yeah.
But if you're vigilant, yes, Jan.
How do you notify the homeowners, the community about that? How do you notify them?
The board immediately disclosed to all the homeowners that it had happened.
Okay.
And let it fall where it was. They had a special board meeting, not a special, but a board meeting, and where they then told all the homeowners how it happened. Now, they didn't disclose the person's name for obvious reasons, but I will, this is the part that seems the hardest to me. Again, I wasn't there, but I've heard the stories, is this woman that did this was so loved and had been there so long, board swore it couldn't be her, and people left in tears. People quit the board over it because they couldn't believe she did that to them.
Story, that's a prosecution.
Still trying to do formal prosecution. It's a difficult case.
Information and stuff, and they
We're trying on that.
Okay, the question here, let me.
Thank you. You can take it from here. You know the rest of the story.
The question here is, who to report it to? What happens next? Well, there's several different pathways. Keep in mind that the division is not a criminal agency. They have authority to prosecute a criminal case. They are administrative and regulatory. Here's what happens when a case like this is brought to the commission. The commission will take a license, they will issue a fine, they will order restitution. Then they'll simultaneously give that file to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General can prosecute. To be honest with you, he doesn't, all eyes, it's a he right now, last all, he doesn't always decide to prosecute.
Right. So
they have their own internal review. Fortunately, they don't always get back with the division, to give times. There's certain communication yet. In theory, the disciplinary action would be taken by the commission, revocation of license, order of restitution, fines, and costs of the investigation. Then the Attorney General would pursue criminal charges.
Now, does that fall under embezzlement?
Yes.
That falls under?
Yes, it does. And we talked about this a little bit too.
And employee dishonesty.
Employee dishonesty.
Yeah.
That's embezzlement, theft, employee dishonesty, or sometimes board dishonesty. When Barbara's here, she's going to talk about crime insurance. There's a statutory requirement that you carry at least 3 months of assessments plus a reserve, or $5 million, whichever is less. You have to have that insurance. It's not optional. It's like E&O insurance. That's not optional either. But it should cover most of what you have there. So, anything about that or Missy?
License expired, so they did take the action. She was smart there too.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get out of this.
Yes, exactly.
But then if there's no criminal action, if she's not prosecuted, can she get her license back?
No. The question was, if she wasn't criminally prosecuted by the Attorney General, can she get her license back? The answer is no. Here, the commission works. In a case like that, they would revoke the license for 2 years. And if the person wanted, they would have to go before the commission, and never going to approve that. I mean, it's essentially indefinitely, but there's something in there, in the statute that says they have to make it 10 years. And then you can come back, but with that kind of record, you're not going to get, they're going to deny.
With that, though, very good question for me is, it's, at that point, it's still alleged. The commission just say, well, we're going to revoke your license. Nothing's been proven.
Good question. The question here is about due process. How can the commission do that? Well, here's how they do that. When they receive a complaint, the legal counsel in the Real Division, Michelle Briggs, lovely, very smart, she will write the criminal complaint, not the criminal, the commission complaint on behalf of the administrator. Who's the administrator? The head of the division is the administrator. Right? Shura is his name right now. I say that because it turns over quite a bit. But anyway, he's who files the complaint with the commission. It's a very legal document. We're going to look at that when we do our administrative things. You, if you're brought before the commission, you have opportunity to respond to that complaint. It's an administrative regulatory type of complaint, not a criminal complaint. Nevertheless, it has the weight of law. So if the commission takes your license away and charges you with a fine, then there's scope of authority. Your response and your due process is to have a lawyer with you at the hearing to respond to all of this. You have an opportunity. It's just like going to court.
I've never heard of a civil agency that is truly an administrative overseer that can order legal restitution.
Oh, they can in Nevada. Trust me, we're going to look at some of that, and one of the cases, I'll just give you a sort of a preview, had to do with a community manager who wasn't licensed, which is a no, and she ended up paying restitution of $175,000 on one account. Anyway, other questions? Moving on. Accounts payable signatures. On your checking account, the question is, who can sign? The statute provides an answer. If it's a reserve account, it has to be 2 board members or a board member and 1 officer sign on any expenditure out of the reserve account. If it's an operating account, you must have 2 signatures, but one of them can be the community manager. So it must be a board member, officer, and the community manager. Community managers who don't want any part of that, right here. And I love others. It's just their personal preference that they not be the signers on any of these accounts, so they defer to the board with an officer. Well, officers like the president, secretary,
Board member, but each one of the executive board.
Well, here's the reason. The question is, why is it stated that way to distinguish between a board member and 1 officer? There's quirk in the law. It's always. And the quirk says that if your governing documents allow, the officers of the corporation need not be members. They have no voting authority. And the origin of that comes from if you were trying to recruit an accountant to help you, you could volunteer to be an accountant who would help you be an officer, be the treasurer. They would have no voting authority. It's a statute, and that's why it's worded this way. I've never seen it happen. It doesn't happen. They usually, if they appoint somebody as treasurer and they hire a CPA. That's common. But inevitably, these questions pop up on tests now and then, and they're really there to trick you. So the question is, can you be an officer of an HOA without being a board member? And the answer is yes, if your governing documents allow. And it doesn't make a lot of sense totally, but the logic of our legislators, it makes sense. Okay, Electronic transfers. Here, the statute is really behind the times. It says that you can only do electronic transfers to the reserves, automatic payments to utilities, or payments to the government. And to do that, you have to have an agreement between the association and the institution. The board has to expressly authorize that, and you have to establish internal accounting controls that comply with GAAP. What is GAAP? Generally accepted accounting principles. That means you have to sit down with your CPA and make sure that you have the proper controls to prevent theft, embezzlement, and that kind of thing. Any questions about that?
Can that be a blanket authorization? You only have to authorize at one time that you're going to do that type of transfer?
Yeah. Particularly because it's going to be, a single account or a single payment system. It's not going to be usually broad authority.
Right. Okay.
And if you have the proper controls, I think that the state needs to catch up, with practice. Because I won't tell, how many of you actually do most of your business electronically? Yeah. Okay, I got this. Just kidding. Yeah, the statute really needs, and I think you're safe, really, even if it were challenged. It's how do you go about it? Well, you have proper procedures, you have policies that have been approved by the board, you've discussed with the board, there's documentation, and you have appropriate controls.
Yeah, I bet we're almost all of us are using sweep accounts.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so they're getting interest on it.
Exactly. So catch up the statute. All right. So that accounts payable. Accounts receivable. So payables who we owe. This is people who owe us. Department tracking money owed to the companies, their number one job, and maintain the owner database because the people going to owe you are primarily the homeowners. Generate bills, create the receivables, maintain those receivables, collections and aging. Aging is very important, and what that means is how far along is this payment process? Should someone pay immediately, or is it 30 days late, or 60 days late, or 90 days late, or 20 days late? Aging of receivables is important because it helps you under your cash flow. And also hits the triggers and the benchmarks for turning people over to collections, okay? Enter funds received and apply payments as appropriate and generate accounts receivable reports. We're going to look at in a minute here at that process. So assessments, prepaid assessments, the FIN account, those are parts of the responsibility of accounts receivable. And lockbox for cash and checks, that's usually a service provided by the bank. This is what Mindy was explaining was bypassed by this particular manager who wouldn't let people drop stuff in the Dropbox, but drop it off to her. So she bypassed an important safeguard. So you look at, what do we do to fix that? But anyway, the payments are made by the customers, and then the bank processes them and to funds immediately. Aging, those balances, those kind of things are all part of accounts receivable, and they're important to analyze to stay on top of your financial condition. Again, this has gotten so much easier with the economy because people are paying typically on time. Does anybody have a really big problem right now with payments? Everybody? We had real problems back in the crisis, so now it's kind of clear.
Still carrying some of those.
Oh, really?
We just wrote them off just recently. They were carrying 5-year-old debts on books and sold 2 times since then.
Did y'all hear that? They were sharing with us that the system was carrying 5-year-old debt. That's really not good. No. Because it drastically misstates your financial position. So if you discover that you've got a lot of old receivables out there that haven't been written off, you need to get those off your books because that's going to clean up your finances and we're going to collect it anyway. And the problem, board members don't want to write off bad debt. They say, they don't understand the impact that can have on your financial statements. They think, well, it's just sitting out there, why write it off? Maybe one day we'll get paid. No, because it has a negative impact on your financial statements. You want to clear that up.
So how long do you hold on to that?
Well, you should have a policy based on your history of collections. And in this case, 5 years is too much. But typically, at the end of each fiscal year, based on your policy, you would write off a percentage. That is something that you sit down and write with your CPA to determine what's in the best interest of the association. Sometimes, like now, it's not going to be much at all because you're going to collect on most of that. Your collection rates right now are probably close to 100%. But when they're 50%, you have to have a formula to get off your books. So there's no magic I can tell you. It's on the history of payments within that particular corporation. Okay. Each owner needs at least 2 accounts, an account, and a fine, or sometimes it's called a compliance account. With the governing documents, we talked about that already, so we don't need to spend too much time. Let's talk about delinquencies and collections. This is a statute, and this is what virtual associations have adopted. Any investment for common expenses or installment thereof that is at least 60 days or more past due bears interest rate equal to the prime rate at the largest bank in Nevada, as ascertained by the Commissioner of Financial Institutions on January 1 or July 1. Once you ascertain what the commissioners decided is the interest rate, then you can add 2%. And that rate every January, July thereafter, until the balance is satisfied. So that's the interest that we charge on past due. In a minute, I'm going to show you what that looks like on the FD website. Any past due fine must not bear interest, but may include costs incurred by the association for collections or any civil action to enforce that payment. It's still pretty weak, but basically what we're saying here is if you pay fines, you're going to let people over to collections. The statute doesn't give you any kind of guidance on when to do that, so that's an internal policy. When it comes to assessments, potential for foreclosure, the statute is very specific on all of these benchmarks, when you can send notices and how that notice has to be sent and all of that stuff. But fines, that's pretty much an internal process of how you want to run that. Assessments are lien. Of course, they're lien on the property. It's an automatic thing. When you buy into an association, your property automatically has a lien on it. It may not be show up on a title search or anything like that. Fees, charges, all of those are enforceable as assessments. Now, what that means is, for all the fines that your homeowner is not paying, you can file a lien on your property. And if collections is unsuccessful, like before, when that property is sold, the title company is going to have something to say about it, and that's sort of bottom line there. Now, there are very specific rules about what you can and cannot do as a community manager when it comes to collections. We're going to talk about the point where your stops and the role of the collection company kicks in. And I have on another slide. We talk about liens. The process will go through a notice of default, notice of sale. When we were in the crisis, the big issue was that super priority lien. Because, again, was the banks didn't want to foreclose. They forced the HOAs to foreclose. Challenged NRS says that if the association forecloses, the bank does not respond, the foreclosure by the HOA wipes out their security interest. You have that unusual situation where a $5,000 foreclosure by the HOA could out a $250,000 note to the bank. Not the fault of the HOA. They put in an untenable position by the bank because the banks created the mess. Do I have any bankers in here that I'm going to ban? Okay, good. The banks created the mess because they started all of these strange investment vehicles called credit default swaps. Does everybody remember that? Yes. Hope and invest. And what they were doing is they were bundling these mortgages and then selling them to investors, okay, for a return. The problem with that is it's so complicated that nobody finds paperwork on who owned the house. That wasn't bad enough. They're sitting there with $300,000 note on their balance sheet, and the property's only worth $150,000. They're going to have a huge write-off. They don't want to do that. So who got caught in the middle? The associations. Associations never really had to foreclose because the banks would foreclose, and they're going to resell the property anyway. But when they got themselves into this mess, they put all of us in a really bad situation. So we're foreclosing, and then later the banks woke up. And wait a minute, you can't do that. They filed a lawsuit. And this lawsuit went all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yes, they can. Because you did not fulfill your legal obligation to respond to the association's foreclosure.
No home, as the homeowners get the property possession into their reserve?
No.
How does that work?
Okay. If the association sells the home,
Right.
there's a hierarchy of who gets what. The thing is the association. They're made whole. So it's, depending on sale, could be a relatively small part of that. And then, of course, any taxes or any other levies. And then at the bottom of that list is the homeowner. But the problem was that investors were going in, recognizing an opportunity, and they were, buying these homes next to nothing. So there's a whole lot of money coming in. Well, the associations were getting paid, hopefully. Happening, the big losers were going to be the banks. So when that all came down in 2015, something like that, or 2013, when it hit the courts, that legislators changed everything. So about that in just a moment. This is a section of the statute, and I don't want to read all of it, but I just want to be aware this is where the statute recognizes the association's right to collections. Under the old section of law, when it came to the foreclosure process, you couldn't collect much of anything from the collection agency. So they fixed that, and this is the result of that. The take home from this is, once again, our legislators in their wisdom to commission. If you read all of that small fine print, you'll find in there it says that fees that are allowed to be charged will be published by the commission. So the ones who determine only what the collection companies are allowed to charge, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So verbiage there, but that's makeup. Now, the problem with collection companies is that nobody likes them. Right? Anyone like a collection company? They're not bad. But they were bad enough that legal had to be taken. And started really with the federal government. Federal Trade Commission regulates collection companies. They pass laws and regulations to stop abuse. big thing, because collection companies were largely unregulated. They call you at 2 o'clock in the morning, they call you, they visit your place of work, they harass you, and they would lie to you about, well, if you don't pay this by such and such, you're going to jail. Well, they don't have authority, but you're jail. But it was so bad that the government had to step in and write the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. You'll learn more about it when Nick does his thing. But the bottom line in the context here is it pivots collection companies from abusive practices. Now, that has a law that mirrors parts of the Debt Collections Practices Act. It's NRS 649. That's the section of law that regulates collection companies. Okay? And the reason that's important is because you are mentioned in 649 as a community manager. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Where the statute is, and then the actual regulatory division is FID, Financial Institutions Division. I'm going to take a moment here. I'm going to go to their website and show you what the report looks like. Let's see if I can make this work. This will take a second. Okay, everybody, all of the state of Nevada websites look very similar, and this is kind of what it looks like. You want to hear fees and prime interest rate. Now this is, and they're so published every January 2018. The rest is 4.5%. So then you can add 2% on top of that. It'll be reviewed again in July. But look at the jump. It went from 3.75% in January 17, 3.75, 3.25, and now we're up to 4.5. So if you need to check what you're allowed to charge, this is when, and it's updated twice a year.
Well, you got the next to the last one.
All the way at the bottom?
Yeah, 10%.
That was in 1989, it was 10.5%, and then in July of that year, it was up at 11%.
Wow.
So, interesting history. Go back in here, when you have an opportunity, you might want to explore the FD website, a lot of useful information on there. That's also where you would go to look up a licensee, like by FID, if you wanted to send notice. And that was the missing component, was HOAs were trying to contact banks, and banks just weren't responding. So, okay. Collection agencies are regulated under FID. Definition is on an NRS 649. I won't go to that, but just to tell you basically what it says is that you have authority to sort of act like a collector of coin. In advisory opinion, you have a copy of that on your thumb. But let me just tell you what it says. As a part of your job as a community manager, collection activities are routine. So that when you are notifying homeowners and what have you, that could be considered collection activity. However, up to the point where you're about to foreclose, you're to go. When you cross that line is when you would need a separate license. So let's look at what that looks like. And so you have this on your thumb drive. That's the advisory opinion put out a division in 2013, I think it was, that tells you where the line is. But I'm going to tell you right here. Okay. This is all covered under 31162 at NRS. It talks about where do we go with notice of delinquent assessments. And a little bit backwards, because when you're going to turn it over to a collection agency. It's after this has occurred. You're going to send a letter to the delinquent owner, 60 days past due. Okay? That will give the owner a schedule of the fees. You're going to say, here are the possible fees that would be charged if you don't comply, if you don't pay up. You must also present them with a proposed repayment plan. This is required. This is not optional. And notice that they have the right to fight or contest what you're saying, that they're delinquent, at a hearing. Once you've done this letter, you're then turn it over to a licensed collection agent or agency. Okay? They're taking it from there, because what happens next, they're going to send out all of the required notices. And the process is clearly defined in the statute. So you do step 1 at 30 days, or 60 days. They do step 2, and then step 3 is days after that. It takes about 6 months to get through this process. In many cases, during the crisis, associations were taking a year or more to get through this process because they didn't really want to do it. It wasn't in anybody's best interest. Why can we foreclose? We foreclose for failure to pay assessments. We've already talked about that, probably done that to death. We can foreclose for failure to pay construction penalties. Remember, construction penalties are assessed when an owner fails to meet a deadline for either an addition or new construction. If they don't get penalty, that's foreclosable. That's why the language is very careful. It doesn't call it a fine. It's a penalty, because fines aren't foreclosable. Some of the crazy things they do. We talked about maintenance abatement. That's where the property is not being maintained properly, or there's a health hazard or something that needs abatement. That's foreclosed. And then lastly, failure to pay or correct a health safety violation. So those are the 4 reasons that the association could foreclose. In today's economy, it doesn't happen that much, because owners, now that their property is come back to its true value. When this was happening a lot, you had homes that were leased for $600,000 that were only worth $200,000. So there's been little incentive to keep up with property when you've got that big a gap. Now that gap is closing. Okay, we talked about the security first, the super priority lien. Here's the only thing that's different now, or a couple of things that are different because of the crisis. Our legislators went back and they said, okay, we have to have more communications between the HOA and the bank. That's why I set it up on the FID website, communication tool. Many of the benchmarks are the same, but what's not is at the end of the process, the first security interest holder, the bank, satisfy all payments to the association for their interest. The other thing that's new, I have this on the other side? No. The other thing that's new is there's a 60-day right of redemption, which means when all is said and done, it's not said and done. You got to wait another 60 days after the property is sold under foreclosure. During that 60 days, the home right of redemption. It's really taken a process that was already rather complicated, and more so. I'm okay with that because associations are going to win. You're going to have the banks paying attention. We got their attention. So they're going to, if there's a foreclosure issue, they're going to step in and protect their interest because they've learned their lesson. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah. Okay. The process is defined in NRS 116.3116 through 31168. It was in 2015 when all these changes were made because of the crisis and the outcome that was unanticipated. Collection costs are allowed as part of the super priority lien. The timeliness and notices, the timelines, they didn't really change except for the right of redemption at the end of the whole process. Opportunities for the bank to preserve their status, and that is a good thing. The other thing we need to talk about briefly, because it impacts this, is mediation. And I'm talking about foreclosure mediation. You may recall that when the crisis was going on, our legislators passed a new law, and it had to do with foreclosure mediation. The goal was to have homeowners and lenders talk to one another and try and resolve issues, the financial issues, mediate a resolution to avoid foreclosure. Because in foreclosure, who wins? We wanted to protect homeowners. And I thought it was a good thing. So if a homeowner is in mediation, you can foreclose. Okay, you wait for the mediation is resolved. Only if it's an owner-occupied unit. Is a certificate of completion recorded by the bank or whatever, and you get copies of that, then you can proceed, or if the owner fails to pay current obligations. So let me explain that a little bit. In foreclosure mediation, you're collecting past dues, just like a bankruptcy. But the rate remain current if you can foreclose. Now, this law had a sunset clause. It was due to expire in 2017. For the 2017 legislative session, our legislators renewed it. So it's in perpetuity now. It's not being used that much anymore because, again, our economy is booming, but it is still out there where the homeowner has a right for an owner-occupied unit, not if it's a rental, owner-occupied unit to go to mediation to try and resolve their financial crisis with the bank, and by extension, with the association. It's another step that helps to prevent foreclosure, a good thing, and keep homeowners in their homes and hopefully HOA.
Yes, so the mediation between the owner and the bank.
Yes.
And if that works out, the association benefits.
Oh, yes, because what's going to happen.
But we're not involved in it.
No.
Not involved.
We're not involved, except that we can't proceed with foreclosure. So what happened is, once this is worked out, they will come up with a financial plan that the owner will be able to pay their bills. If they didn't, then the homeowner would still have an incentive to work the HOA to get caught up. Win-win for everybody, really. Tell you web-based listing, what you'll find there, name, address, contact, communications vastly improved, and I think banks learned their lessons about tracking their own assets and that kind of thing. They learned the lesson that real estate always go up in value, it sometimes goes down. Now this is NAC 116470. Don't worry about remembering that location. What's important is this is what the commissioners came up with that you can charge, or collection company can charge. So, for example, this is where it comes from. A demand or intent to lien letter, you can charge $150. Notice of delinquent assessment, $325, and so on. These charges that you're not typically going to be charging, this is what the collection companies are going to be charging. But you need to be aware that this is produced by the Commission at the direction of our legislators, and it is in NAC 116. Yes?
Is this what you notify the homeowner of the schedule of fees?
No.
No, you don't notify them?
No. Well, that's a good question. The question is this what you notify the homeowner about the schedule of fees? No. That schedule of fees that we're talking about in the 60-day letter that you do, boilerplate. It's talking about the fees they may be subject to pay to the association, so like fees or interest rates, those kinds of things. This is totally exclusively for the questions? Everybody good? Take a break or just go ahead and finish? Keep going. Keep on, is that okay with everybody up there?
Yeah.
Bankruptcy.
There's more
We'll probably see a lot more of that when he talks about it in his session on state and federal law. But to make sure we cover things here, there are basically three types of bankruptcies, and you hear them referred to as Chapter 13, Chapter 11, or Chapter 7. 13 filing is you're going to sit down with creditors and work out, or a judge actually, and work out a repayment plan over 3 to 5 years. So Chapter 13, all of them involve a judge, but the outcomes are different. So under Chapter 13, you're going to reduce your payments and extend them longer. Chapter 11 is typically more for companies and corporations. It's an organization and restructuring of their debt. You don't see individuals file Chapter 11. Chapter 7 is liquidation. So that means I'm going to sell everything I own, and people line up, and we'll see who gets paid what. It's supervised by a judge, but it's basically, okay, I give up, we're liquidating. Now, the implication for association is that you have to do different accounting. When a homeowner files bankruptcy, your collections stop pre-bankruptcy filing, then you start a new account at post-bankruptcy. Because all of this old debt is on hold. What can happen is once the assets are liquidated or a payment plan is worked out, the judge will determine who's going to get what, okay? You have to do post-bankruptcy accounting because that's when you're going to get paid, depending on the process being used. You're going to have to spend a lot of time worrying about this, but you just need to be aware of what happens and its implications pre-bankruptcy and post-bankruptcy. Okay?
Is there a period in between those two that you're just out of luck then?
You're pretty much out of luck. And to be honest with you, it's never good.
You're out of luck.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
You're
Well, they haven't been paying them in the meantime anyway, so.
Yeah, I didn't realize that when it was
Now, what could happen, though, is that during the process, the property gets sold. And that, So it's just one of those things that we have to learn to live with. Let's talk about audits real quick here. Audit is the most comprehensive, thorough review and testing of your financial records and your financial statements. Remember the difference. Financial records are all the documents that are used to create your financial statement. So it's going to include purchase orders, invoices, the whole 9 yards. And that is when a CPA will come in and he will look at your financials, or she will look at your financial statements and test the validity of those statements. They'll send out letters to your creditors and say, the association says that they owe you $500. Agree. So it's a very comprehensive analysis of your financial position. It is the highest level and the best way to go, really no matter the size of your association. A review is less extensive, it's cheaper, but also much less thorough. And you don't have the same assurances of accuracy. When you get finished with an audit, you're going to get a statement that's going to be qualified or unqualified. You want an unqualified statement that says the rest of the audit is that the financial statements accurately reflect the financial position of the company. That's what. Yes, ma'am.
explain qualified and unqualified for this?
Okay, qualified means that the auditor had some concerns. There was some tracking of bills or what have you that they couldn't nail down. An unqualified means they were able to satisfy for themselves a very high standard of all of the billing and receipts that are in the statements and the records.
Yeah, you had said that before, I
Yeah.
just forgot.
That's okay. The review, we'll talk the triggers for this, but it's not nearly as good as an audit. Here's the thing about it. If you, at some point in the association's life cycle, have to have an audit, it is really difficult because you then have to go back and almost do a mini audit on all these darn reviews. Just a time, in my opinion. A compilation is basically, they kind of look at the stuff and say, does this make sense? Yeah, okay, good. There's no real assurance. So that they just compile it and look at it. It's almost worthless. So let's talk about how they are required. Your budget is less than $45,000 a year. There's no statutory requirement. And when I say no statutory requirement, that means NRS. There may be something in your governing documents. So look at that. If your budget is less than $75,000, then you are required by law to have a review the year prior to the reserve study. So you would bring in the CPA, have them do a review. If your budget is $75,000 but less than $150,000, you have a review every year. If it is $150,000 or more, you have an audit every year. Now, keep in mind, if your governing documents are more strict, you would follow them, but they cannot be less strict, okay? So if governing documents say, for example, if our budget reaches $100,000, we'll have an audit, okay, that's fine, but if it gets to $150,000, you can't do an audit. You must do an audit. Conditions where you would have to do an audit is a petition by homeowners. And we've talked about homeowner petitions several times, particularly in a recall election. In most other instances, what is the target? This is 15%. Yeah. Yeah, they do that to mess with you. That's the only reason. So, if 15% of your homeowners sign a petition saying they want an audit, you have to get an audit. These are audit requirements in NHC. Remember, the legislators punted. It has to be a full presentation on an accrual basis prepared in accordance with GAAP, balance sheet for the operating fund and the reserve fund. This is just like what we talked about last night. Statement of revenues and expenses for operating reserve, change in fund balance that reconciles the beginning and the ending balances, cash flows, any disclosures required by the guide. You remember we talked about the guide that you can purchase that to how to do financial statements for associations. And then any supplementary information like reserve disclosures and a schedule that explains and compares budget and actual expenditures. So those are requirements. CPA will know that. It must be completed not later than 210 days after the end of the fiscal year. Why 210 days? I have no clue. It's almost another year, but that's the deadline they set. You make the audit available to the division within 30 days after it is requested. So if the division sends you a letter and says, we need this audit, you know it's done. On Form 562 with the division, it's going to ask you certain financial questions. The budgeted revenues, when statements were audited or reviewed, and the date on which that happened, and whether the audit opinion is qualified or unqualified, okay? And whether the review report is modified or unmodified, which is kind of the same thing. So what you want is an unqualified opinion. auditor who's authorized to perform the audit must be a CPA and independent of the association. So you have a homeowner or a board member who happens to be a CPA and they want to do your audit, the answer is no. It has to be someone who's independent, so you don't have any conflicts of interest. As a manager, you're involved in these audits. You're going to be asked to help compile a lot of the records, to get them ready for the auditor's review, to answer questions and be available. If your management company does the auditing on behalf, which many large companies do, then the auditor will probably visit your management company and talk about their policies and procedures. And we're talking about qualified versus unqualified. Real quickly, the IRS, we talked about this, and I think probably Carly covered it. But the message here is that just because we are nonprofit doesn't mean we cannot file taxes. Every nonprofit still has to file taxes. There are certain forms that are used for associations, and they're listed here. It's up to your CPA to decide which is the most advantageous for your association. And that's going to depend on many, many variables, like if you do have a golf course and other sources of revenue. Not a big deal, but you need to be aware the takeaway here is nonprofits still have to file tax returns even if they don't owe any taxes. And look, does hire refer to the building or the budget? Questions?
I have a statement when it comes to audit. Whenever because I'm on site, if I'm leaving an association to take employment elsewhere or just to take a break, I always request at the last meeting that I'm at that the board get an audit of the records that I'm leaving behind. I've never had anybody do it, but it's documented in the minutes that I requested it. And when I started a property, I always requested it, but it hasn't been done, that they perform one from the person leaving.
I think that's a good practice. I don't know if you all could hear that, but me as a manager will always ask for an audit when she's leaving a client to clear up any issues there. And when she's taking over an association, she wants an audit. So I think that this makes good sense. There's nothing in the statute that would require it, but
it is something we can request. They usually don't, when you're leaving, they usually don't take you up on it, but it shows in the minutes that you wanted one.
Exactly. Okay, everybody got their study questions?
Yeah.
All right. Annual assessments are what? What do they do? A, they fund the operating budget and contribute to the reserves. Special assessments may be assessed for what? All of the above. Very good. Reserve assessments, which imposed by the board, may be imposed by the board even if the governing documents state otherwise. Very important. Budgeting that estimates the amount something should cost without examining historical cost is called zero line, A. Expenses budgeted in the operating budget are what? The operating budget. C, based on what's required in the governing documents. Items in the operating budget, all the following except what?
A.
D, fines. Don't put fines in your budget because you don't want to rely on that revenue. Very good. Okay. The annual budget mailing includes all of the following except what? D, reserve study. You only have to have a summary. It's a cut and paste kind of thing. A summary can be sent in lieu of the complete budget if what? B, both A and B are correct. The budget mailing, which of those statements? A. Very good. Disclosure of any gift of $15 or more for a board member. At a budget ratification meeting, the budget is deemed ratified unless what happens?
A.
B. present or by proxy.
Oh, present or by proxy, I would have.
Read those questions very carefully. Go over them again, because they might sound similar, and you jump at an answer with reading all the possible answers. And this is one of those, because it says, present at the meeting.
And ratified.
Yeah.
Yeah, not.
It's, present or in person or by proxy. Electronic transfers may be made only for.
Sorry, so on that one, on 10, the slides show A.
Yeah, all the slides said A.
Yeah, here's the reason for that. We have the opinions between the ombudsmen. The ombudsman, in response to a written request, said that proxies were okay. The previous ombudsman said you had to show up in person. So I apologize if there's inconsistency on the slides that I didn't catch.
But you didn't.
Okay? Does that makes sense, but that's the explanation. So proxy is allowed for rejecting the budget. That's the most recent interpretation. Sorry?
This says that it's the majority of the.
Answering 11.
Oh, 11.
They're yelling A at you.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay.
The majority of the present or by proxy. So if 5 people show up and 5 proxies, are you saying that?
Let me see if I understand the comment. There is, if 5 people show up and they have proxies, Yelply, that could reject a budget if the proxies specify reject the budget. The likelihood of that happening is pretty remote. And the whole reason for this change was because of change of opinion by the ombudsman.
You need 51% or higher number to reject it.
Yeah.
51%.
Okay, and remember, keep 2 things in mind. It says which are best answers the question. And in statute, it says a majority is the minimum, or a higher percentage is required in the governing documents. So majority is the minimum. A supermajority may be required. Everybody good?
Because for proxy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If you need some more, need me to go into more detail, shoot me an email and I'll go through it with you.
And they're doing the same thing I did, because they're saying A, they didn't see the word reject after the meeting. So it goes out the window because it's rejecting it and the question says ratified.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's still confusing, shoot me an email. I'll work through it for you. Electronic transfers, D. All of that, everybody good at that?
Yep.
Okay, reserve account. Reserve checks must be signed by C. 2 board members or 1 board member and 1 officer. So each owner has 2 accounts. What is their D? Assessments, special assessments, reserve assessments, construction penalties, and 1 fine. 14. Interest rates on delinquent assessments are what? D. All of the above. Published in Financial Institutions Division, based on the prime rate at the largest bank in Nevada, plus 2%, and they're adjusted in January and July. Delinquent fines cannot include interest. Is not included in a notice of delinquent assessment. B. The contact information for the collection agency. That's a step ahead. Once you do these things, then the collection company will contact the homeowner. If the owner declares bankruptcy, what must happen? A. Very good. A new account must be created for post-bankruptcy charges. Which of the following is the most thorough? A. Audit. Good. Which of the following annual budget amounts require an annual audit under NRS 116. C, 150,000 or more. The following is not subject to foreclosure.
C.
Failure to pay back. Good. Any questions? Like I said, if you do have questions, or if I've mucked it up for you and haven't made something clear, shoot me an email, and I will sort it out for you. Okay? Have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow night. Yeah, what was that?
And I maybe we'll get it right. You said earlier that the association had a CAM.
An association can be self-managed. But if you have someone